And that was a disgraceful performance, in my opinion. We threw that game. We gave it away by doing that. We gave them the friggin' game. In my opinion, that sucked. What's that? Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game. Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
This is Hockey on Tap, pilot episode 2, playoffs. You kidding me? With Bill, Schwim, and Little Steve live in the Primetime Radio virtual studio. Take it away, boys.
Hey guys, and welcome to Hockey on Tap podcast. I'm your host, Bill Dean, and I'm here with my two co-hosts, Steve Echevarria and Mike Sandello, a.k.a. Little Steven Schwim. So, boys, I mean, the league just wants to get right into it, so we should do the same thing. That's great. The league wants to do, get right into it, so we'll do the same. They don't want a regular season; they just want to jump right into playoffs. There's been bandy about talks. 2014 playoff. Crosby's okay with this as long as it's safety is number one. So they got their star, one of their stars that says they're good with it, and obviously we've thrown about some articles showing some quick little brackets, some talk about cities and states that could be used to house this 24-team setup. Host teams and cities like Edmonton, Vancouver, Toronto. They're taking Vegas, which would be fantastic. Also a little Minnesota, and then I think what do we say? Arizona was officially given the nod to host some to NHL and sports. So let's discuss. Actually, first, Steve, why don't you give the beer rundown quickly?
Yeah, if we want to go through what we're drinking, since I think this is appropriate for a quarantine, since I have no idea what day of the week it is anymore. This is Sunday Feels by Dogfish Head. It's their take on a mimosa-style beer. They call it a beer mosa sour. Really light, really smooth. In fact, before I got Untapped and joined Untapped, promo for Untapped, I had no idea what the hell crushable meant for the longest time. I saw it on there. I was like, what? I don't get it. Maybe a can is crushable. Anyway, crushable means you can drink it all day. This is a beer you can drink all day. Really smooth, really light, really tasty. Schwim.
My turn. All right, so I am drinking, this is Black Project Tombstone. It is a double dry hopped sour ale made with grapefruit. Really, really tart, actually. I was very surprised. I've never had this before, so this is my first time having this. If anybody's ever had this, let me know what you think. I think it's pretty good. Really tart, also pretty smooth also, I would say. This, like I said, it's Black Project. They're from, actually, Denver, Colorado. Really good. Really like it.
If you haven't had sours before, you may want to ease into this one because it's super sour. And the concept of a sour beer sounds really strange to people who haven't had beers like this before. But they are, in my opinion, the most perfect summertime beer that you could have. Just
Delicious.
It's like a cold glass of lemonade sitting on the beach or sitting in the park, wherever you want to be on a summer day.
Nice. Well, I'm obviously repping Dogfish, but that is not the beer that I'm drinking today. I'm actually drinking Magnify, which is a local Fairfield, New Jersey. Don't Stop Now. It's a raspberry, cherry, vanilla, lactose. Not for Steve, but it's a very delicious fruited goza.
I can have it.
Yes, Shrimp can have it. But no, Magnify around here. There's a lot of good breweries in northern Jersey, all in Jersey in general. Drink local. Support your local breweries and obviously restaurants and support the bars. They're all going through it just as tough as we are. So, we thank them. And once again, another service, all the healthcare workers, everybody watching after everybody in the hospitals, police, fire, everybody. Just thank you guys. It's awesome. So, we appreciate it. So
Excellent.
now they
Chris
get to do
Havlock,
this.
Chris Havlock says that Trillium makes some great sours too. If anybody heard of that that brewery Trillium, I actually do agree they make some excellent sours. If you guys want to check out some sours, Trillium, support your craft.
Very good. No, I mean, we're talking about. Sorry. No, I mean, I was saying they threw me right off, man. No.
That's what I'm here for.
We're giving props to all the servicemen and women, and they get to do that, and so we get to do this stupid stuff and talk to you guys and just bullshit and have fun. But all right, some hockey playoffs, the stuff we came here to actually talk about.
Let's do it.
Mouthfeel.
Dive in.
Great term, mouthfeel. Anyways, so we're talking about the playoffs. Playoffs. But a good thing to talk about is some scenarios and obviously brackets and how they want to do it. They would do 4 different divisions, and then they would have, because the 2014 playoff, the way it is, there's 7 teams would be from one and 6 from another. So they would have to move about some teams into other separate divisions so that they could round out the brackets a little better. And they're talking about the Rangers possibly being that last spot, in the Metro, and they'd have to go play the Atlantic teams. I'm sure Schwim would be happy to play the Rangers, and Mr. Shesterkin.
Totally fine with that.
Yeah, Atlantic can take the Rangers. No, thank you.
Yeah. That was possibly another name to this podcast, Atlantic to take the Rangers. So, all right, well, let's talk about some hockey. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead. Take her away.
Yeah, so they're looking to split this. Well, the latest rumors, leaks, what have you. Gary Bettman spoke today. Once again, very vague on everything, and not necessarily denying anything, but not announcing anything, not making anything official with the amount of games, the locations. He mentioned 8 to, like you were saying before, 8 to 9 cities to potentially finish out the remainder of these playoffs. But the one big idea that I guess has gained the most steam, is getting the most legitimacy, is this breaking it down to a round robin start. So they'd actually start with what we hear 3 weeks of training camp, then dive into a round robin of 6 teams per division: Atlantic, Metro, Central, Pacific. Everybody plays each other once, and then there's a points percentage calculated between how you finish in that round robin and also how you finish the season. So higher seeded teams still will get an advantage. The top 2 from each division will then get a bye entering this next round of the playoffs, while the bottom 4 in each division play a best of 3 series. Now, this seems to be the most realistic thing to do, I suppose, as long as they can get the correct cities together. And we can get into a little bit later. We'll get into if anything can work at all. But as far as I don't know how you feel about this, Schwim, but I think of all the ideas that I've seen floating around, this seems to be my favorite. It almost has like an Olympic style / World Cup of Hockey style feel to it. Which we all know is very exciting, except, it's different because this is the end of a season and not an international tournament. But I don't know. Do you like it as much as I do? I'm totally fine with this scenario should they move forward with it.
I'm kind of, I don't want to say opposite, but I think 24, I think that's too many. I think it should be maybe, I don't know, I heard something about they could even do 20, they could do 16, they could even do 8. I don't know. I don't think 8 would be. Anything's going to be entertaining. No matter what we get, I'll be happy with. But 24 to me, in my opinion, seems like that's too many teams. That's a lot of, and like they have to figure out how many places all these teams are going to play in. They have to make sure everything is cleaned every single time. I think that the most important thing is the safety of all the players and all the personnel and everything, and having all these teams on top of each other. might be, I think, a little bit too much. So that's why I think going down to the regular 16, you could split 4 teams up in 4 different hub cities, or split them into 6 cities, whatever they wanted to do, and just do a straight 16 team playoff. That's how I feel.
But you gotta think about these bubble teams too, because the bubble teams still need that opportunity to make it, and that's why this circumstances.
That's like the fairest way, whatever. But like this is like so like you might not be able to do fair. You might just, if you want to get something, they might not be able to do fair, and might just have to go with the top teams in the regular season. We played 70-something games. It's pretty. The teams were pretty much set. Most of the teams, not all of them. Some were on the bubble there, so there's gonna be 1 or 2 teams that would have been different. But I don't know. With the circumstances now, I think it's gonna be, in my opinion, it's gonna be tough to get all those teams in and do it safely. Most importantly, and then go from there.
Right, and like I was saying before, I mean, we can get into the logistics of all this, because I know that it seems like the league can come up with a plan and we just move with it, but I don't know, Dean. Can this even happen? Like, what if somebody gets sick? Be it in the first round, be it in the round robin, be it in the, what if they get all the way to the finals and you get 2 players test positive for COVID? What happens? Do they quarantine for another 2 weeks? They delay it another 2 weeks? Do they cancel it altogether? Can this work?
Well, I think the way that they have this set up is what I've been hearing is 3 to 4 weeks of a so-called training camp / a buffer period before that, the games actually started. So I think built into there would be a 2-week hiatus where, they're testing every day and they're making sure that everybody's healthy, and, there's no ins and outs. And I think I read a couple of things about, possibly having players' families come. Anybody that has, wife and kids, they're coming with them because they want to make sure they're safe. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's a smart idea. Obviously, you're going to have, some logistics in terms of, you can't have anybody come into that space, because if that, quote unquote Hotel California is blocked off, you're not having anybody in and out. You're going to go right to the games, come back. Once that team's eliminated in the playoffs, they're booted, and then it's back to square one, where they're continuing to make sure that everybody, and like we were talking in the beginning, Sidney Crosby's, his number one goal is safety, and they're going to make sure that every player is good going into it, that they're not going to have any issues. And from that comes the fun part about how they can go about and make sure these brackets are good. I'm personally, on the outside looking in, the Rangers, I'll take the 24 teams. If for some reason there's only 16, I'm okay with that, but I want to make sure that the draft is the same as usual. Status quo. The draft is normal, because I want that top pick. If I'm not making the playoffs, I want a chance to get the top pick. Right.
So it all depends on that. Going back to what you were saying about players bringing families, testing. I know that Fauci had said realistically sports can continue if the players are tested weekly. Ideally weekly to see. Mm-hmm. But I was also hearing that these bubble leagues. So in theory, the MLB, for instance, a bubble league. If you're going to create a bubble league for the MLB, we're not talking about just players here. We're talking about the entirety. We're talking about coaches. We're talking about trainers. We're talking, bus drivers, hotel workers. It's upwards of 10,000 people that they come up with this number about. Are they going to be able to keep this 10,000 people properly quarantined and test them enough to keep this going? So all these things aside, I mean, there's a lot of. You think it'll what?
I think they'll lock it down. I mean, I think that if you go and you leave, you ain't coming back for a while.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. But if you looked,
like that, going away and being gone for 3 months
away from your family.
Yeah.
I know that there There was worry, and I hate to keep bringing up the MLB. There was worry from Trout about starting the MLB season. His wife's expecting their first child.
Yeah, a lot of them have new
He's going to
kids
leave
already
to
and
go
are
see the birth of
expecting-
his first child, and then what? He's got to quarantine again before coming in. I don't know if it's going to be the MLB is a different monster altogether because they're trying to salvage the season, an entire season, and well, you know, the NHL is just kind of trying to get a winner out of this. But for example, Germany, who's been handling this situation very well, decided to open their soccer league up this weekend, and they had 2 players test positive. That team needs to quarantine now, and we have a visitor.
Again.
And the one of the coaches also, he left the hotel room to get toothpaste, and now he has to quarantine. So you're looking at things like silly things like that could potentially come up. But all things aside, so let's get the what ifs out of the way as far as the health and if this is even feasible, and let's just pretend that it is, and let's talk trash. Let's see what our teams are bringing. Our matchups. Hey, is Hank gonna see a playoff game start? I don't know, Dean. Walk us through first of all this Rangers movement to the Atlantic. Do you prefer them in the Atlantic? Would you prefer them in the Metro? Let's roll with this whole hypothetical that these groups are set. The scenario that we've heard about is gonna happen, and let's just pretend like this is gonna happen, and let's see where we go.
No, I want no part of the Atlantic. I don't want Boston. I don't want, not at least this early. I mean, I want to take the speaking from Hank's perspective, I'll play anybody. I just want to be in the playoffs. That's all it is. But speaking from Bill Dean's perspective, which is get the hell out of Boston. No.
Boo that man.
Boo that man. No, I'll absolutely take Philly.
Put Hank's head away.
Yep.
God damn it. He's a god.
Really
He's a god. Anyways. Sam, you jerk. No, but
hey, where's the beef?
That's the beef. Anyways,
Chris Havelock asks you how do you stop Marshawn from licking people?
Punch him multiple times in the face. He's the one hockey player, man. If I can get a hockey fight, he's the one hockey player I want a hockey fight. But that's never gonna happen.
And you'd lose.
And you lose badly. I think with all the contact that everybody's already going to have going through this, do you think they'll eliminate fighting or something during?
No, they can't. There's the game's not going to change. The game can't change. Yeah. They can pretend. They can pretend, but
trying to say something like that, like
the MLB said,
no to protect the safety of everybody.
Yeah, no spitting.
The MLB said no spitting and hugging.
Everybody's spitting all over the place.
Oh, do you do the hockey handshake line at the end of each series?
You have to do elbow bumps.
I mean, yes. I think all is going to go. Most certainly, all that's going to stay. But let's get aside these semantics here and get into the matchups.
Quickly,
Havelock. So let me know.
Havelock did ask real fast about what he thought about possibly having an asterisk on the season. Depending on what goes on. I mean,
I think you know what I don't mean to. I think the only way people are going to argue for an asterisk is if somebody who was not in a playoff position ends up winning this.
That would be an asterisk, yes.
Otherwise, if it's St. Louis wins, if Washington, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, if the Rangers win, they're going to get an asterisk no matter what. In my
absolutely
book,
not.
Just because I'm
sure
you probably paid somebody off in order to put them there. That's my guess, at least.
Hey, the old Knicks frozen envelope to get Patrick Ewing. Let's get a frozen envelope to get the 2014 playoff where we go and win the championship. Give me one. Thank you. Have a nice day.
That must have been in James Harrison's envelope. It's probably from you.
That's a pretty good one. That James Harrison, man. That's just absolutely great. I know we talked about that on podcast with Sam this week on Primetime Radio, but if you thought there was only one team that was Bounty Gate, I mean, come on. But anyways, so actually, this is a part of Primetime Radio Network. We're happy to be a part of this, and we're the brother station to the Let's Go Devils, who we are friends with, kind of. Yeah, they are.
According to Timothy Gavin.
Timothy Gavin. All right. So, anyways,
Timothy
back to playoffs.
Gavin.
Go ahead, Steve.
Back to playoffs. No, you were starting. I had asked you about the Rangers and if you had preferred. Do you prefer them in the Atlantic? And then Schwim can answer if he prefers the Rangers in the Atlantic. And this is
That'll be
this
a
is
short
also
answer
this is also
with 3
assuming
letters.
this is also assuming any momentum that was going throughout the season is going to continue. Also, I mean, you have to think about this. Is you see teams lose momentum from their bye week, let alone 2.5, 3 months off and back at it. I mean, everybody could be basically starting from scratch, and this is where you run into that whole situation of who's the hot team. But besides that, if we're going to say, if we're going to base the Rangers off of how they finished the season, I don't want to play them. So good riddance out of the Metro for me. Stick them in the Atlantic and let somebody else deal with them.
No, I mean, we were hot going into the, up to that game against Colorado. They tied it up with a couple minutes to go, and they lost in overtime. But I mean, they were on fire going in there. I mean, they have the firepower in front with obviously Panarin, who's a Hart Trophy candidate, with Zibanejad. We were talking about 40 goals in 57 games. They have a pretty good blue line with Tony and Adam Fox, Jacob Trouba, and then if Igor Shesterkin's healthy and capable of man in the net, I mean, he was 10-2 and 12 starts. I mean, he was awesome from getting that AHL midseason call up. They're tied with the Blue Jackets as the league's youngest team at only 26. I mean, they're a team to be reckoned with. They get in the playoffs as long as they can keep that hot streak. Any other team would, and I don't think they want to face that. And I don't think Hank's going to get a start unless there's an injury. But I think he'll probably.
So
be
you think who's starting day one?
Shesterkin.
Who's starting game one?
It's got to be
Shesterkin.
Shesterkin.
Yeah,
I agree. I think it should
absolutely.
be, but I don't know if they were going to just for nostalgic reasons try to start Lundqvist and see what he does.
I think he's aware that Shesterkin's going to be the starter.
Yeah, I think the problem is that they went about not playing him for a while there. There was a couple weeks where he barely saw any games, and that's the kind of issue that you'll have. Getting a hot goaltender back to getting hot. They're all going to be cold. They're all going to be, and especially because you're not going to have any regular season games. You're going right into playoffs. I mean, that's going from practice to a playoff game where the stakes are the highest. You're
It's like
laying out
0 to
it's gonna be
60
rough.
in like 2 seconds.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess that's the idea of the round robin, but
That's what I was going to say. There's going to be I think there's going to be so many people, if they go right into some, like the playoffs like that, there's going to be so many injuries. I think there's going to be, like, who's going to be like the first, like, huge injury of the playoffs that's going to probably miss the entire next season. That's going to happen to somebody.
Stamkos?
yeah, you could.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Don't jinx it. He's been injured enough.
Schwim, how do you like the Rangers in the Atlantic?
I'm fine with it. I don't care who's in what division. For my team personally, it doesn't matter. I'm assuming we can't go anywhere but up from last year. So unless we get swept by the Rangers.
Unless you lose every round robin game and then get swept in the best of three.
But I don't care. I don't care who my team plays. They have to beat whoever they have to beat. They just need to, like, my team's measured on right now because they've fallen short. They've done so well in the regular season and fallen short so much in the playoffs that they need to. It doesn't matter who they play. They have to go through a multiple playoff series and at least get to a cup, I would think.
Yeah, I think they're covered.
And also though in that Atlantic, you're throwing in Florida and the Canadians. I know one concern that was brought up because of this whole how are we going to do this, and you're adding these teams, and Carey Price can stand on his head for a week, and all of a sudden the Canadians are onto the best of 7 series. But the Atlantic, I mean, to me right now, if you're looking at the end of the season, I mean, the Bruins are there and Tampa Bay is there. But the Maple who knows what you're getting with the Maple Leafs? I mean, there's a ridiculous amount of talent on that team, but they just can't. I don't know what it is about them that they can't seem to put it together. They're hot and cold, but and notoriously blowing it in the playoffs, but you never know with them just because the talent is there. But you look beyond that, and the Rangers could certainly be a surprise out of that division because Florida and Montreal, unless Carey Price carries that team, those
Montreal's
two teams should
it's
be, the whipping boy of that division. I mean, the two of them unloaded UFAs, depleted their lineup a little bit. So
I think the Rangers could beat the Leafs if they play them. I think the Rangers are right there with the Leafs. I think they could definitely beat them. I think if they met with the Canadians or Panthers, I think, although the Panthers are playing pretty well before the season went out, but I think the Rangers are better than them. I think they're better than the Canadians.
Uh-oh.
Who is that?
God?
No, this is the voice of Sam Woo. This is what I think. And this is what scares me about this whole playoff format. The teams come back, everybody's cold. We've established that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think after hearing the Mike Trout story that you guys said, I think the teams that have younger players that don't know any better are going to thrive. The older teams with older veterans with families to think about could be a distraction. I mean, you're asking a lot from these players. So
yeah,
it may happen where the Rangers, could be in the Stanley Cup Finals, and then if they happen to win it, of course I would agree to have an asterisk mark on the Stanley Cup.
God damn it.
I think you get a lot of votes on that one.
Only in that case. Only if the Rangers win, there's an asterisk. Anyone else, it's fine.
Every single other team gets a free pass.
Every single other team.
But seriously, do you guys agree with my theory? I mean, I think that could happen.
No,
absolutely.
Yeah, I can see that. Although I do agree, and you get a lot of those younger guys, but you do have guys in their early 20s, early to mid 20s that are also filling these rosters that are having, like Mike Trout, they're having their first kids, or they have a little kid already, and but yeah, I think the older, more experienced teams are certainly going to be probably a little more wary and a little more concerned about their families and the state of everything. I mean, everybody probably by now has heard the Radko Gudas interview, so there are players out there who are not happy with this moving forward. I mean, the board who's discussing these playoff situations is made up of some notable players, but mainly team executives and league executives trying to figure this out. But there might be some pushback from the players.
Yep, and I was reading on Facebook Live, Havs had a question about just the travel, obviously between Canadian and U.S., so maybe they don't do a Canadian-U.S. games, maybe they'll just leave it all U.S., but that brings a point about players actually coming back from their home countries. You have guys in Sweden, Russia, all these guys are so far away, the travel back and possibility of catching that on an airplane and coming back and playing with your buddies, and all of a sudden, it starts up. It's obviously a scary point. I mean, obviously anyone with like a respiratory issue, asthma, anyone with heart conditions, those guys aren't going to be able to play. Well, I mean, obviously heart conditions, you really
like Max Domi and Mitch Marner was just talking about. Max Domi is a type 1 diabetic. He's, the Canadians are in the playoffs, so he is at risk, higher risk than other players, Yeah. So, yeah, who knows, But yeah, I mean, all these details aside, I mean, I'm assuming this is why nothing can be announced, because in order to hammer out all these details, even from any league, there's really nothing announced besides the NFL trying to say everything's going as normal. But they don't have to start until, I guess, camps are in August or whatever, so they can say it for now. But when the time comes, we'll see.
Everything could change by then again too. We could have
and you also have the problem. You also have the problem with, are the MLB, the NBA, and the NHL all going to try and start at the exact same time? I mean, you could have. I mean, these hub cities might not be hub cities anymore, because you might have all of these organizations trying to stay in hotels wherever, and you could. There are serious issues that could come up to finish the season with this virus, and if it will even finish, and they could say that we're going to move forward, and then it could all come to a screeching halt out of nowhere if players start testing positive. So,
yeah.
But all that aside, let's keep pretending.
I was going to say that, if they're going to, have all these sports start up, I think the NBA and the NHL especially will probably be in, talks that they'll try to make it so that NBA stays over here and NHL is over here. They're not going to have them anywhere close to each other.
Yeah,
and
but it's a joint effort, and with state and government officials obviously have a lot to say about this situation. Also, it's not just the NHL, and obviously the the MLB, the NBA, and the NHL are all dealing with the Canada United States travel. So there's
I
a
think they
lot.
could keep everything in Canada for the hockey. Keep it in all those Canadian hub cities.
You could.
And
Oh,
then
I mean,
there's no travel back to
there's
the
also something about all teams are playing. They're not going to use any of their cities.
Mm-hmm.
So there won't be an actual home game. Not that there
Home ice
really
advantage.
would be, because there's no fans in the stands. But anyway, let's keep talking potential matchups, right? Metro Division is pretty stacked. Capitals, Penguins, Flyers, Hurricanes look pretty good. You throw the Islanders and Blue Jackets in there. Who knows with either of them? Blue Jackets obviously swept Tampa Bay last year, so another young, fast team with solid goaltending there at the end of the year. But I don't know. I mean, you want to think the Flyers and the Capitals and Penguins were slumping. Could they, when this starts back up, are they going to regain form and be the top two teams again? Are the Flyers going to be able to continue that momentum also at the end of last season? Or are they going to have a slow start? But as far as the Penguins go, I'll talk about the Penguins lineup a little bit. We're talking about the health of teams and everybody's getting healthy, right? The Penguins actually are stuck with too many forwards now.
Too healthy for once.
Which it sounds like a good thing, and it is, I guess, in a way. But 17 healthy forwards starting until Dominic Simone just had at the end of April had a shoulder surgery. He's out for 6 to 7 months, so he is. No matter what we start, he might be ready for training camp next season if we're starting in November, December, like they think that he might. But the lines that I have drawn up here seem pretty standard, with the exception of a third line, fourth line, whatever you want to call it. Top line, Crosby, centering Gensel and Zucker seems to be pretty settled upon. Malkin centering Rust and Marlowe. Some people aren't happy with Marlowe there, but I think that's a better fit for Marlowe, because you have to keep the line of Bluger, Tanev, and Zach Aston Reese for penalty killing. And, of course, you have Jared McCann, Patrick Hornquist. And then the third. And you have to pick from Bukestad, Rodriguez, Connor Sherry, Anthony Angelo, Sam Lafferty. Those last two probably will take a back seat. Those are, those guys played admirably when everybody was hurt. But you think in those three guys, who do you put there? I couldn't tell you. If I'm thinking Penguins coaching staff and thinking for penalty killing, I'm probably putting in Evan Rodriguez. Also for right-handed center ability. But then there is Bukestad with who knows what you can get. Defense will be healthy, so that's nice. Obviously, goaltending. Pittsburgh fans may have heard that Matt Murray is actually getting a personal goalie coach while this quarantine has been happening. A guy named Adam Francilia. He's worked with Connor Hellebuck as well as a bunch of other NHL goalies and skaters. He works on biomechanics, which actually it teaches the brain to activate specific muscles. So it's a different approach to goaltending, and he swears to Penguins fans that you're going to see a noticeable difference when you see Matt Murray in the crease. So if I'm to guess, and I was guessing before that Matt Murray's probably starting game one. I think even more so now, as long as he doesn't get hurt in training camp, I think Matt Murray starts. And then, if he falters, Tristan Jarry comes in. But I think it's Matt Murray's.
Short.
I don't think it's that short.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's that short. I think he's gonna, if he has, maybe 2 bad games. But if he has like a bad game to start, do they go back to him for game 2? Probably.
If he gets pulled like game 1,
guess.
you think they go right back to him?
I think they'll go back to him again. And if you see something similar in the next game, they might go back to Jarry. But I think Sullivan has all the trust in the world in Matt Murray. And I think they're going to start there.
Cups,
so
it's hard.
Yeah,
he's
a good goaltender. He's just, there's lulls. He hasn't been spectacular by any means, but he didn't win 2 cups by accident. And he's not Antti Niemi. There's a name drop for you. But that's the Metro. I think Capitals, Penguins, Flyers. I think it's going to be a tough one. I don't know who's going to end up. I think you got to think the Capitals almost certainly are going to earn that first round bye. And then I think it's probably going to be between the Penguins and the Flyers. But you never know who's going to falter out of the gates. The Penguins aren't great
who's
starters.
In terms of point percentage? Who's the points percentage? I think it's
The
Philly,
Flyers. So it is in that
Yeah.
order. Yeah, it's Capitals, Flyers, Penguins, and then Hurricanes. I believe it's Hurricanes, Islanders, Blue Jackets just kind of sneak in there.
Yeah.
But now,
And then
but out
obviously
west
Atlantic.
too. I mean, let's not forget about out west. I think out west is going to be a free for all. But you could certainly see Edmonton. I can see Edmonton coming out. Young, fast, skilled, rested. But who knows, right?
You know, another good one that I see from the West is actually the Jets. I mean, Connor Hellebuck, you know, had a fantastic year. I think he's the leader for the Vezina myself. I'd pick him. I know that Tuukka obviously had a hell of a season, but he's also sharing time with Halak, who actually just got a contract extension. You know, that's you know, him and Net has solidified that team. You know, obviously, you know, that core of, you know, Scheifele, Wheeler, Connor, Laine, Ehlers, you know, and then just on defense, you know, they have Neil Pionk, who's done pretty well, former Ranger, Josh Morrissey, who's
Of
a
course,
very
name
underrated
dropping
defenseman.
former Rangers.
Ah, yeah. And then, you know, they even had that, I guess, trade deadline. They picked up Dylan DeMello, who's done pretty well, former San Jose. But, you know, getting Brian Little back,
Yep,
you know,
there we go.
they have offense there.
Block him out.
Yeah, that cat, man. That you know, they got offense and they got some, you know, some decent back end players, and obviously the goalie, which, you know, you get round or two of being hot, you can stop it. You could stop it too. You know, and obviously Calgary's still up there. Edmonton, like you said, Vancouver, Phoenix,
St. Louis. Can't rule out St. Louis. St. Louis is
Yeah.
St. Louis is
No.
currently the best team in the West. They are the team to beat in the West. Probably the team to beat in the league. You know, nothing against Boston, but still, I think they're still the defending Stanley Cup champions. I still think they're the team to beat. But you do have some. Yeah, I think you could. I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised by the West.
Is going to have the potential to beat anybody.
Yeah,
Because
but I think the West
if everything
is.
went smoothly right into the playoffs, like the way we were trending, there was no break or anything like that. All these teams would be, all the top teams obviously have a big advantage. But now, anybody like who has a good fast start can.
Yeah,
This
That's
is
why
the
I'm
great
like, kinda
equalizer.
I guess I don't know.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
break
I
has
mean,
been
we'll
the
see how
equalizer.
it,
Any team could come in.
I think the East is probably a little more predictable. Again, you never know, but I think the East is a little more predictable. But the West, with the exception of, you know, I can't imagine Arizona's going anywhere. I know they're playing better, but I have no confidence whatsoever in them. Who knows with Chicago? I mean, there's a lot of teams that didn't like the fact that Chicago was going to make it because you know they have all the star power. They unloaded some of their UFAs, but who knows what Chicago can do? You put them in that situation. I mean, there's still elite players on that team, but I think I to be completely honest, I have to just go with the Blues just because of the Blues and they're so solid. But otherwise, I have no idea. Like if the Western Conference Final, whatever that may be, I would pick St. Louis. That'd be my first pick, and then it would just be like blindly pointing at a map and picking a team who's going to be their
I can see
opponent.
Vegas being really good too.
Vegas
especially
could.
if they get to.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you look at all these teams, and
Stay
you're like,
home.
okay, they could. Avalanche are great.
Absolutely.
Nashville,
That'd be another one.
maybe. Dallas Stars look great at times as well.
Yeah,
So
they're hit or miss though. I think.
yeah. So it's like, and maybe the Minnesota Wild are going to end up playing St. Louis and bringing them to Game 7 or something in the Western Conference Finals. It's just, I couldn't tell you in the West, but in the East it seems a little more straightforward. But again, you never know. But I think the teams who are favored are probably going to come out of there. The ones you expect.
I mean, we haven't really
like
mentioned
4
Boston.
teams.
We haven't really mentioned
Yeah,
Boston. But, I mean, that team
Boston
is,
and
Because
Washington.
we don't like
you
them.
know,
I don't want to talk about them.
I don't disagree,
mention
but
Boston.
you know we have to give them some credence. I mean, you know their top line's nasty. Obviously, goaltending has been very good for them, and their defensive core. I mean, Zdeno Chara is just a freak of nature that he's still playing at 43 and playing top minutes and
playing well.
doing
Yeah.
I mean, him and Charlie McAvoy are a great pair. So, but you know, so we were talking obviously some playoffs. You know, and you know, obviously last episode we talked a little about the draft, and you know that's obviously taking a big back seat. They took all that team's negative feedback because teams were furious that they could possibly have a draft before the season even ended. And that's obviously sat back, and they're renegotiating how they're going to set that up. But like we said, they want the playoffs. They want the regular season to kind of take a back seat for right now, get right into it, little training camp, and then they'll get going from there. Look on Facebook Live once again.
Get them.
Yeah, take two. The healthy. John Reed says healthy Colorado is scary. Obviously Hav says the reset button is going to make all this a complete toss up, and he's absolutely right. This break's going to be interesting to see what happens to hockey. But I had a couple little quick things. We talked a lot of playoffs, but a couple little quick tidbits we saw online. Some trade candidates from each team. I was going through this article on Sportsnet, and they were talking about Gaudreau, Saad, Mantha, Puyarvi, Dumba, and Brodin. Obviously, Domi. We talked about Montreal. For the Devils, Pavel Zacha. Hank, obviously, for the Rangers. Possibly trade Georgiev and then have Tyler Wall, who they actually just signed as a college, not as a free agent, but he was one of the draft picks he signed from college. He could back up that net in Hartford and trade Georgiev, and I'd rather see that than Hank. But Hank's obviously a big name. Gostisbehere, whoever they want to trade from Pittsburgh out of Yari and Tristan Jarry and Murray. They have DeSmith.
I didn't have to do it.
Yeah. Thank you, buddy.
It's a soft
you have DeSmith there.
Jogging or yogging?
I believe it's yogging.
I believe it's a soft J.
It's a soft J.
No, but you have DeSmith right there that he could back up, and he could be a pretty good backup. We think we saw him last year, didn't we?
To who, Jari?
No,
I'm sorry, I completely lost you. Oh, Casey DeSmith was, he's been a backup for some time. They extended him with the intention of, actually before the season, they were, looking to trade Tristan Jarry, and there were no takers, or, what teams were offering for him just was unreasonable. So they had to waive Jarry. Obviously, somebody would have picked him up. So they decided to waive DeSmith. Nobody picked him up. He's been sitting in the AHL this entire season, but, they signed him as the backup. So chances are one of them is going to stay. You want to think it's going to be Matt Murray, but, the cap is still there. So
I think you can get a lot more for him and not have to take such a big cap hit.
Matt Murray will demand a major cap hit, but if for instance, one of the question, I won't spend too much time about this because I spoke about this last week. If Matt Murray comes into these playoffs and he plays and maybe underachieves a little bit, Penguins falter and just eventually lose. Not necessarily his fault, but say he wants to demand somewhere between $6 to $8 million a year. 2-cup winner. Obviously, they can't afford that. How do you pass the reins off to Tristan Jarry, who has never been in any sort of high pressure situation, never played a playoff game? Obviously hypothetical, because who knows if he's going to play if the season continues. But it's a tricky situation. All signs are pointing to Matt Murray staying, but if he's gonna demand a lot of money, I can't see the Penguins keeping him unless they, pull the trigger, traded both of them, and sign somebody else. So. But I imagine Matt Murray's going to stay. Tristan Jarry is going to be traded.
They should do Jimmy Howard a favor and sign him. Get him some wins.
Get him another win before.
And then trade him. I feel bad for him. Get him a couple wins.
So Havelock actually just mentioned this. He said that, who actually benefits the most from getting Hank.
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
No. But he benefits the most from getting Hank. Actually, I think the Penguins, if they were to get rid of Murray, and I actually saw this in an article written about them possibly trading for Hank, or if he was cut, which they're talking about the buyouts, him being
buyouts,
cut.
right?
That's him going there. That's scary, and I absolutely hate it. But
you would absolutely get a Penguin jersey.
No, not anywhere close.
Yeah, you would.
No,
what was that?
But
what was that?
Another beer. A couple other quick names
I
I had
on
that trade. That trade list, what I thought were pretty good, were Kaloran, obviously, for the Bolts, which, Schwim, you've talked about him multiple times being,
yes.
Kerfoot with the
He's the-
Leafs.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go finish, and then I'll start with Killorn.
Actually, Fleury getting traded, depending on how Vegas, decides to go with their contracts. They have a lot of people coming up for pay raises. So, and then the last one was
That
Erik
and
Karlsson.
the addition of Robin Leonard to Vegas could mean something.
Yeah.
Although I think Marc-Andre Fleury being traded is a reach right now. I think a lot of those players on that list were kind of and just a lot of it was hypothetical. I don't think Marc-Andre Fleury would be traded, but obviously they're not going to have a tandem of Robin Leonard and Marc-Andre Fleury making 12-13 million combined between the two of them. I doubt it.
And Leonard's a free agent, isn't he? He's gone.
He's a UFA. He's going to demand a big contract, and he
could get it.
Deserves it. I mean, the guy has had 2 stellar years, so I mean, give it to him.
That was an odd trade there.
It was a strange trade, but I mean, Fleury, as well as he did when he first started with Vegas, his numbers are going down. So he still makes highlight reel saves and he's still solid, but he's getting older. So something to consider for Vegas for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the salary cap.
Never mind.
No.
We need a
I was
mute
saying
button for
quickly
this
that
kid.
the salary cap could actually go down, which would hurt teams that have those big price.
Just about everybody.
So,
mm-hmm.
All right, but let's go back to Killorn in Tampa.
Yeah.
So he's the only, I think, legit person that they can trade. All their other guys who they could trade are who don't have no trade clauses or anything like that, or like Kucherov and other people, and they're not going to trade them. So to me, it was between Killorn, Palat, Johnson, and Gord. Killorn's making $4.45 million for the next 4 years. And he has a no trade clause right now, but on July 1st, it changes to a partial no trade clause, which means he can list 16 teams that he would not accept the trade to. Everybody else that I listed, Palat, Johnson, Gord, all have full no movement clauses. So they would have to waive those in order to trade them. And they're making, all those 3 guys, except for Palat, are making more than Killorn. Yanni Gord is making $5.1 million for the next 6 years. He's playing the fourth line.
He had a good season.
He had one good
season.
Decent season.
Yeah.
Killorn's actually playing really well this year. Last year it was
That's a good question.
Pretty much garbage. But they're going to have to trade somebody, and I think it's going to have to be him because they're already pushed up against the cap. And if it's going to get lower going into next year, I could see. I was going to say I could see them trading 2 of them, but I don't even know if any of them would want to waive their no trade clauses. Maybe Palat would. I mean, he only has 3 years left on his deal. Everybody else is 5, 6, and up. But to me, July 1st, Killorn, that partial no trade kicks in, and I think that's a big game changer for them.
Right. Also, you think of the compliance buyouts, the potential compliance buyouts that they might be awarded. The 2 things that I had heard are one, those 2 compliance buyouts, which if nobody knows what compliance buyout is, it's you're basically buying out the contract. It doesn't count towards the salary cap. They're kind of rewarded that. Matt Junio asked a great question. We'll get back to that in a second as soon as we're done talking about this. Another thing with the salary cap going down also was I think they said that they could potentially take 10% off of it, all of the already signed contracts to kind of help with that. So everybody's not, there's a lot of teams pressed up against the cap right now, so they're not automatically starting the season, a few million over the cap, and they have to figure out what's going on. So there are a couple options. Of course, they're going to figure that out when the time comes. But interesting for Tampa Bay to potentially trade Killorn, could be trade bait, and then of course maybe use some buyouts on some of those other guys.
Like Yanni Gord, the 6 years at
already
$5.1 million. I think
yeah,
that's like
I don't think they'll buy him out yet
for like a 4th line, 3rd line player. But
you have to.
Won't, but
Tampa's gonna have to pay Cirelli and Sergachev coming up, right? So I mean, you
they're
really
both
need
restricted,
to
and both those guys are getting huge raises. They're both making I think $700,000 and $900,000
league minimum.
They're going to get giant raises, which they should. So
we'll talk about Cirelli a little more next podcast because we have some quarantine awards to give out. So he's
got one of mine.
Obviously in the notes, yeah. But we'll talk about that next week.
Going back to Matt Junio's question, does Eichel want to leave Buffalo if they keep missing the playoffs? I think the short answer is yes. I don't think he's happy. I don't think anybody's happy in Buffalo at all, to be completely honest with you. I think he'd probably deny it, but I think if the opportunity came to leave Buffalo via trade, if management came to him and asked him about being traded, I think he'd be more than willing.
Did you guys
and
hear
that kid,
the
that
Pagula issue up in Buffalo? Sorry to interrupt.
no interrupting.
Did
Oh
you
God,
hear
again.
about this? Apparently, this is what happened. Again, I read it somewhere, so I like to verify. Apparently, a lot of the Buffalo Sabres employees are very disgruntled, and then when they, during this, I don't know if it was before or after the pause, um, the wife of Terry Pagula, I think it's Kim Pagula, did this PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if you guys heard about this, and it was basically
PowerPoint or a presentation?
No, it's whatever. So
People still use PowerPoint.
she
Yeah.
basically,
Really?
Yes.
she basically just like
I'm with you.
blasted the employees, just absolutely
Wow.
ripped into them, because basically they're not making enough money for, as what one employee said, to fit her lifestyle. Apparently, again, I forgot where I read it. I think it was New York Post, I believe, but I'm not sure. And it's like that kind, like during this type of crisis, you're pulling that kind of crap. It's if I was a player, I'd leave immediately.
Yeah.
I'd leave
Yeah.
immediately. So, that's just the kind of culture that's up there right now, and I think that's going to weigh heavily on Eichel. I just wanted to just chime in on that.
Yeah, I agree with you, as well as some of their other young players there. And it's messy. I mean, this entire season, it's been well documented how messy it's been up in Buffalo with the players and the fans, especially, kind of just being sick of this crap, and nothing's changing, nothing's improving. Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo is a discussion in and of itself, but they have some exciting players on that team. So it's upsetting to see, great players like that, superstar players, just not living up to their potential. And they're still great, but not living up to their potential just because of how unhappy they are.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely a tough way to go with up there being a Bills fan and a Sabres fan. They're both getting killed. Well, actually, Bills doing a little better, but they still suck.
We'll get
No,
JJ
but,
on next week to talk about Buffalo.
Yeah, give us a little into.
If he's still around, I think he left our group text a long time ago. Too busy or too tired of listening to our nonsense and Simpsons
my brother-
memes
we
and
don't blame him,
videos.
but
Yeah, I know. I think my brother said he came on one time and it was like 130, and it was only a span of like 2 hours.
Yeah,
and like
yeah, that
80%
sounds
of them
about
were
right.
Simpsons related.
None of it was important
No,
or relevant
Nope.
to anything in life.
not
Just
at all.
stupid banter.
Just the banter.
Yeah.
No, but all right, quick. Let's talk about these beers. Finish them off. We'll obviously give a sneak peek, and it's possibly next week's pod. Like I said, I had Magnify's Don't Stop Now. Really good beer. Great flavor. Just really sits on the tongue. It's pretty good. I like their beer. I get a
That's a terrible
4.25.
description.
Like I said, no, like
That's
the
the worst
flavor just
description I've ever heard in
stays
my
on.
life.
Yeah,
Stop talking.
No.
Just say you liked it.
really good. 4.25 Untapped. We'll leave it at that.
Hey, there's Brownie. Brownie says
Oh,
he's got
Brownie.
118 messages missed.
Wow.
Don't read them, Brownie. That's all right.
We can give you the gist of them. Just Simpsons.
Yeah.
Simpsons hockey, some sexual innuendos, and more Simpsons.
Yeah. No Shorts Guy gifts though.
Oh,
We
definitely
haven't
not
had
those.
those in a while. So I
Short
actually
Guys
finished.
So if Shorts is listening, don't
Uh-oh.
put those on our on.
Brownie, don't you finish that sentence? I dare you not to. So I finished this. This was awesome. Like I told you before, Sunday feels great for summertime. I actually moved on to another Dogfish and Rotoback collaboration, another sour, Vibrant
Dogfish
Potion.
shout out. I like it.
Yeah, another light just it's a sour. I don't find it overly sour. I find or the Sunday feels either. So I just think they're very easy, really easy to drink. Light beers if you're a fan of light beer and just want to try something new. Yeah, try out either one of these. They're wonderful.
The music is playing. I'm drinking beer. It's really good.
All right, Schwim,
That's
take her
debatable.
home, buddy.
Oh, see you at the party, Richter. Not Lundqvist.
Huh? Boo.